I never thought I would be in a situation like this right now, like my marriage is falling apart, but here I am, pouring out my soul to my listeners because I have nowhere else to turn. My wife, Emily, and I have been married for 7 years. It wasn't always perfect, but it was ours, you know. We've got a 6-year-old daughter, Lily, and I really thought we had a solid life together. But looking back now, I can see the cracks started forming long before everything blew up in my face. It began subtly. Emily started pulling away, becoming more distant. At first, I chalked it up to stress from her new job and life's usual chaos. She'd come home later than usual, sometimes distracted, but when I asked, she'd shrug it off with excuses about work or meeting friends. I didn't want to be that paranoid husband, so I pushed the doubts down, telling myself everything was fine. But deep down, I knew something was off. That's the part one hates the most, how blind I was to the signs. It was little things at first, her texting late at night, saying she had to go on more business trips. I'd hear her giggling at her phone, and when I'd ask, she'd quickly dismiss it, "Oh, just a funny meme from the group chat." I didn't think much of it then, but now it all makes sense. Things really started getting weird a few months ago. Emily told me she was going on a work trip to Boston, and something about it just didn't sit right with me. She had this spark in her eyes, like she was excited. And not in the usual, "I'm going to Boston for work" way, but in a way that made me feel like I was missing something. She spent hours packing for this trip, carefully picking out outfits. I mean, I get it, you want to look professional, but she was going all out. New lingerie, fancy dresses, stuff she hadn't worn for me in years. I tried not to overthink it, convincing myself that maybe she just wanted to feel good about herself. But that little voice in the back of my head wouldn't shut up. The night before she left, I tried to talk to her, tried to see if we could spend some time together. I even suggested we take a weekend trip ourselves, maybe to reignite that spark between us. But she brushed me off, saying, "We'll talk when I get back, okay?" She kissed me on the cheek, but it felt hollow, like it was just part of the routine. That was the last night I truly felt like I had a wife. The next day, she left. I dropped her off at the airport and waved goodbye, but something in my gut twisted when I watched her walk away. It felt final. For the first few days of Emily's trip, everything seemed fine. Better than fine, actually. She called me every night before bed, telling me how busy work was but how she was excited to come home. She'd send me photos of herself in these beautiful outfits, out by the hotel bar or grabbing dinner with colleagues. She looked amazing, and I started to feel a bit guilty for doubting her. Maybe she really had just wanted to feel confident on this trip, to remind herself she was still attractive, even after years of marriage and motherhood. One night, she sent me a picture of herself in the hotel mirror, wearing this black dress I hadn't seen in years. She looked stunning. I remember texting back, jokingly, "Wow, you packed some serious heat for this work trip." She laughed it off, but then she sent another picture, this one of her in the lingerie. My heart raced. She texted, "This one's just for you winking face. It was moments like that when I felt reassured, like maybe I'd been wrong to worry. Maybe she'd picked out all those outfits for work, but the lingerie was for me, a reminder that I was still on her mind. I started looking forward to her coming back more than anything. We talked about how we'd make some time for ourselves when she returned, send Lily to my mom's for the weekend and just be us again. I could almost feel things getting better, like this trip had given her the space to miss me, to realize how much we needed each other. I was counting down the days until she'd be home. I even cleaned the house, planned a surprise dinner for her return. But then she stopped texting. It all came crashing down on the last day of her trip. I hadn't heard from Emily since the night before, and I was starting to get worried. She always texted me good night, even if it was just a quick message. But this time, nothing. I figured she was just busy or exhausted, so I tried not to overthink it. Then, around midday, I got a call. It was one of her colleagues, a woman named Sarah who I'd met at a few company events. My heart sank when I saw her name pop up on my phone. Why would she be calling me? "Hey, is everything okay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. There was a pause on the other end, and then she said, "Look, I don't want to worry you, but Emily's been hospitalized. She had some kind of food poisoning or something, and they admitted her last night. But she's going to be fine." My stomach dropped. Hospitalized? Food poisoning? Why didn't anyone call me sooner? I blurted out, already grabbing my car keys, my mind racing to book the next flight out. Sarah quickly continued, "I know it sounds scary, but really, don't worry. The doctor said she just needs some rest, and she'll be fine in a day or two. Emily didn't want to worry you unnecessarily, so she asked us not to call, but I figured you'd want to know." I didn't care if Emily didn't want me to worry. My wife was in a hospital in another city, and I wasn't going to just sit here waiting for updates. "I'm coming. I'll be on the first flight. Can you send me the hospital details?" There was a slight hesitation on Sarah's end before she said, "Honestly, there's no need. She's already doing better, and the doctor said she'll likely be discharged by tomorrow. It's just a stomach thing. Really, don't stress about it. She'll probably text you later today. Just hang tight." Every instinct in me was screaming to ignore that advice and fly to her anyway, but Sarah kept insisting it wasn't serious. "Just give her some time to rest," she added. "She'll write you when she's feeling up to it. It's nothing major." Reluctantly, I agreed. I stayed glued to my phone, waiting for Emily to text, to reassure me that everything was fine. But as the hours dragged on and my phone stayed silent, I started to feel that familiar knot of anxiety tightening in my gut. Something was wrong, really wrong. Days passed, and still no word from Emily. At first, I kept telling myself that it was fine, she was in the hospital, probably resting, and when she was ready, she'd text or call. She was under the supervision of doctors, after all. I didn't want to be that overbearing husband, pestering her while she was trying to recover. So, I waited. A whole week went by. Each day I'd wake up expecting a message or a call, but nothing ever came. At first, I tried to stay calm, convincing myself that she was just too tired to talk or maybe had lost her phone. But by the end of that week, the silence became unbearable. Something didn't feel right anymore, and I couldn't shake the growing panic gnawing at me. So, I finally caved and called Sarah, the colleague who had told me about the food poisoning. Maybe Emily was still too weak to reach out, but Sarah could give me an update. The phone rang, and when Sarah picked up, I immediately asked, "Hey, I haven't heard from Emily at all since she was hospitalized. Is she still there? What's going on? I'm getting worried." There was a long pause on the other end, longer than felt normal. Sarah cleared her throat, and I could hear the hesitation in her voice as she responded, What do you mean you haven't heard from her?" "I mean exactly that," I replied, trying to stay calm but feeling my pulse quicken. "It's been a week. She never called or texted. I figured she's still recovering, but she should have said something by now." Another pause, this one more uncomfortable. "Wait," Sarah said slowly, almost nervously. You haven't spoken to her at all? She hasn't contacted you?" I could feel the cold dread rising in my chest. "No, Sarah. Not a word. What's going on? Why hasn't she reached out? Is she still in the hospital?" There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end, followed by Sarah's shaky response, I thought you knew. Emily was discharged days ago." I felt the air leave my lungs as Sarah's words hit me. "She was discharged days ago," she repeated, her voice sounding distant, like it was coming from underwater. "What do you mean? Everyone's home?" "Emily's not here, she hasn't contacted me at all," I said, my voice tightening with panic. "If she was discharged, why didn't she let me know? Where is she? Sarah hesitated again. The trip ended 2 days ago. All of us got home already. Emily was with us at the airport, but our flights were different. She had a later one that day. I just assumed she made it home after that. My mind was racing. Emily was supposed to be on her way back, and yet, there had been no word, no messages, and now I find out she'd been discharged and should have been on a flight days ago. The silence that had been gnawing at me all week now turned into full-blown dread. Wait, so, you left first? And she stayed behind to catch a later flight? I asked, struggling to piece things together. Yeah, Sarah said softly. She seemed fine when we said goodbye. Tired, but okay. I just figured everything was normal. Have you tried calling the airline? Maybe her flight was delayed or cancelled. I couldn't even respond. My hands were shaking as I gripped the phone. Emily was supposed to be back by now, and she hadn't even told me when she'd left the hospital or that she was heading home. What was going on? I muttered something to Sarah, I don't even remember what, and hung up. My heart was pounding in my chest as I stared at my phone, willing it to buzz with a text or call from Emily. But it stayed silent. Something was terribly wrong. She should have been home. She should have called. That's when the panic set in for real. My mind raced with worst-case scenarios as I tried to figure out where the hell Emily was. I couldn't sit still anymore, so I started making calls, desperately hoping someone, anyone, would know something. First, I called the airline, but they couldn't give me much information. They confirmed she was booked on a flight 2 days ago, but beyond that, they were no help. I asked if she'd checked in, if the flight had landed on time, but all they said was, "Sir, we can't disclose passenger details without their permission." My frustration boiled over, but I bit my tongue. Hanging up, I cursed under my breath. This was getting me nowhere. Next, I called Emily's friends. Maybe she had stopped somewhere on the way home, or there was some kind of misunderstanding. But every call ended the same way, confusion. None of them had heard from her since before the trip. One friend, Jessica, sounded genuinely worried when I explained the situation. That's so weird. She usually texts me after her trips. Are you sure everything's okay? That question made my blood run cold. No, everything wasn't okay. My wife had vanished without a trace, and I had no idea where she was or why she hadn't contacted me. I called her family next, but they hadn't heard anything either. Every dead end made the pit in my stomach grow deeper. I called Sarah back, asking if there was any chance Emily had mentioned changing her plans, maybe staying somewhere longer. But Sarah didn't have any more answers. We all assumed she was heading home like the rest of us. There wasn't anything out of the ordinary, I swear. I tried calling the hotel where she stayed during the trip, hoping someone there might have seen or heard something after she was discharged. The front desk was polite but useless. "I'm sorry, sir, but we don't have any information about guests once they've checked out." No one knew anything. Every call, every conversation, led to nothing but more questions. Emily was out there, somewhere, and I was completely in the dark. The worst part was her phone. It just sat there, silent, like a brick. I must have called 100 times, but it always went straight to voicemail. I could feel the panic clawing at my chest, tightening like a vice. I was on the verge of losing it. After days of dead ends, unanswered calls, and mounting fear, I had no idea what to do next. I was seriously considering going to the police to file a missing persons report. I mean, what else could I do? My wife had disappeared. I hadn't heard from her in over a week. No one seemed to know anything. My hands hovered over the phone, ready to dial the local precinct, when suddenly my phone buzzed. It was a text. From Emily. My heart raced as I opened the message, expecting, hoping, for some kind of explanation, maybe a reason for her silence, a sign that she was okay. But what I saw made no sense. It was a photo of an ultrasound. No words, no context, just an ultrasound image staring back at me through the screen. I froze, staring at the picture. My mind couldn't process it. An ultrasound? What the hell was going on? Why would Emily send me this after being silent for so long? Was she trying to tell me something? Was it hers? I immediately tried calling her, but the call went straight to voicemail again. No ring, no answer. Just that automated voice telling me the number wasn't available. My heart started racing again, but not from relief, from confusion. A million thoughts ran through my head. Was she pregnant? Why hadn't she told me sooner? Was this why she'd been acting distant? I felt a knot form in my stomach, tightening with every second of silence from her side. Unable to make sense of it, I called her best friend, Jessica. She was one of the few people I knew Emily confided in, and at this point, I was desperate for answers. Maybe Jessica knew what was going on, maybe she had some insight into this bizarre situation. When I explained the ultrasound photo to her, Jessica's voice wavered with concern. I had no idea. She never mentioned anything about being pregnant to me. She paused, then continued cautiously. Let's meet up. I think we need to talk in person. Something's definitely not right here. My pulse quickened. Jessica sounded as confused as I felt, but maybe meeting her would help me put the pieces together. There had to be a reason for all of this. There had to be an explanation. I met Jessica at a small cafe downtown. I had this strange mix of dread and hope churning in my gut, clinging to the possibility that she'd have some kind of explanation for the madness of the last few days. When I got there, she looked nervous, like she didn't want to be the one having this conversation. Her eyes avoided mine at first, and I could tell something was weighing heavy on her. We sat down, and I wasted no time. Jessica, what the hell is going on? I got an ultrasound picture from Emily, but I don't even know where she is. She's been missing for days, and no one's telling me anything. Please, just tell me what you know. She sighed, fidgeting with her coffee cup, still not looking me in the eye. I didn't know how to tell you this, and I'm sorry you're finding out like this. I honestly thought she would have come clean by now. My heart was pounding in my chest, the anxiety building with every word she spoke. Come clean about what? Jessica finally met my gaze, her face filled with guilt and hesitation. That ultrasound photo, she didn't mean to send it to you. It was a mistake. That photo was meant for someone else. I blinked, stunned, the words not making sense at first. Someone else? What are you talking about? She took a deep breath, her voice barely above a whisper. Emily's in Paris. She's been seeing someone, another man. That ultrasound, it was meant for him, not you. My mind went blank. Paris? Another man? I felt like the world was collapsing around me. What are you saying, Jessica? She's having an affair. She nodded slowly, clearly uncomfortable with the truth she was revealing. I'm so sorry. She didn't want you to find out like this, but she's been with him for a while. I don't know if the baby is yours or his, but she's not coming back. She moved there to be with him. I sat there, completely shattered. Paris. A lover. The ultrasound. My wife was in another country, building a new life with someone else, and I had been left in the dark. It was like my worst nightmare had come to life. How long has this been going on? I finally managed to ask, my voice cracking. Jessica looked down, shame washing over her face. For a few months. She kept saying she was going to tell you, but I guess, she just couldn't. I'm sorry, I didn't know how to tell you. The weight of it all crashed down on me in that moment. The silence, the distance, the lies, everything made sense now. Emily had been leading a double life, and I was the fool left behind, desperately waiting for answers while she disappeared into someone else's world. And now, I didn't even know if the child she was carrying was mine. I left the cafe in a daze, barely able to process what Jessica had just told me. Emily had left me. She had left us. My wife of 7 years had packed up her life and moved to another country to be with another man. But the part that haunted me the most wasn't even that she left me, it was that she left our daughter, Lily. How could she just disappear like that and abandon her own child? The betrayal cut so deep it felt like my heart was being ripped apart. I understood that relationships could break, people could fall out of love, but how could she walk away from Lily? How could she just move to Paris with her lover and leave me to explain this mess to our little girl? I kept replaying the last few weeks over and over in my head, trying to find any signs, anything I had missed that would have hinted at this double life she was living. How had I been so blind? The work trips, the distance, the late-night texting, it all seemed so obvious now, but I'd been too trusting, too hopeful that everything was just stress or work-related. I never imagined she could be capable of this. And now, the ultrasound. That image kept burning in my mind. Was that baby mine? Had she been carrying our child while she was planning to leave me? Or was this new life she was growing for someone else? I couldn't even wrap my head around it. The idea that I might never know if that child was mine, it felt like a betrayal that reached a whole new level. But even more than that, I couldn't stop thinking about Lily. How do I tell a 6-year-old that her mom is gone? That she just left us without a word? I thought about how Lily had been asking, "When's mommy coming home?" every day since Emily left for that trip. I'd been telling her soon, just like I'd been telling myself. But soon had turned into never. I sat in my car, staring out the windshield, my head spinning. How could she do this to us? How could she do this to Lily? Sure, leave me, if that's what you want. But your own child? How could she walk away from her? What kind of mother just abandons her family like that, starts a new life without a second thought? The questions were pounding in my head, but none of them had answers. I felt numb, crushed by the weight of it all. This wasn't just the end of my marriage. This was the end of the life I thought we had built together. And now I was left to pick up the pieces, alone. The next few months passed in a blur. After the initial shock, I found myself just trying to survive each day. There were so many moments when it felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me, but Lily kept me going. She had no idea what was really happening, how could she? I wasn't even sure how to explain that her mother had left us for a man in Paris. So I told her that mommy was still on her trip, that she was working hard, and she believed it, for now. Jessica, Emily's best friend, was a lifeline during that time. She stepped up in ways I never expected. She'd come over with groceries, help with the house, and spend time with Lily when I felt too overwhelmed to face the day. It was strange at first, seeing her every day, but eventually, her presence became a comfort. She was the one person who knew the whole truth, and she didn't judge me for falling apart. In a way, Jessica became part of our routine. She was there for dinner, she helped with Lily's bedtime stories, and after Lily went to bed, she'd sit with me, and we'd talk, or sometimes, we'd just sit in silence. I found myself almost forgetting about Emily, which felt both like a relief and a betrayal at the same time. There were nights I stayed up thinking about Paris, about Emily's new life, and about the baby she was carrying. But as the months passed, those thoughts came less frequently. I started focusing on being there for Lily. I rebuilt our lives without Emily. Slowly, the wound began to scab over, though it never really healed. Then, just when I thought I was moving forward, something happened that I couldn't wrap my head around. One evening, Jessica came over like she always did. We had just put Lily to bed, and we were sitting in the living room, drinking coffee, when my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen and saw a number I didn't recognize. It was a text. At first, I thought it was some random spam message, but as I opened it, my heart stopped. It was a photo of a baby. Attached to it was a single line, "She's here. I'm sorry." I dropped my phone. I sat frozen, staring at the photo on my phone. The image of a newborn baby burned into my mind. "She's here. I'm sorry." That message was echoing in my head, twisting the knife that had barely begun to heal. Before I could even process what was happening, the doorbell rang. I didn't move at first. My heart was pounding in my chest, and every instinct told me that whatever was waiting for me on the other side of that door was about to turn my world upside down. Again. I got up, legs shaky, and walked toward the door. When I opened it, the air seemed to leave the room. I almost collapsed right then and there. There, on my doorstep, was a cradle. Inside it, a baby, wrapped up in a soft blue blanket, fast asleep, completely unaware of the chaos swirling around him. But there was no sign of Emily. She had just left him there. My body felt numb, my mind struggling to keep up with what I was seeing. I looked down, and next to the baby, there was a note. My hands trembled as I picked it up, my eyes scanning the words that would shatter me all over again. "This is your child. I don't need him. Take him and raise him." It felt like the world went silent. My heart, my breath, everything just stopped. Emily, my wife, the woman I had loved and trusted, had abandoned our newborn son, just like she had left Lily and me months before. I stumbled back, staring at the child, trying to understand how anyone could do this. How she could be so cruel, so heartless, as to leave her own baby on a doorstep like some stranger's burden. She was gone. No explanation, no warning, just a note. Just a baby she didn't want. I sat down on the floor right there, next to the cradle, and for the first time in months, I broke down completely. I cried like I hadn't cried since Emily left us for Paris. Cried for the little boy who had been abandoned by his mother before he even knew who she was. Cried for Lily, who would never understand why her mom had walked away. And I cried for myself, because now, once again, I was left to pick up the pieces of the life I thought we had. Emily was gone. She had abandoned our family, not just once, but now twice. A mother cuckoo, leaving behind both her children like they meant nothing. And I was left sitting on the floor, holding onto a cradle that now held the last reminder of a woman I no longer recognized. After that night, everything changed. Holding that newborn boy in my arms, I knew what I had to do. Emily was gone, not just physically, but emotionally, completely cut out from our lives. She'd abandoned both of her children, and whatever remnants of love or hope I'd once held onto for her were dead. I wasn't going to wait around anymore, hoping she'd come to her senses or try to make things right. She had left, twice now. First, she walked away from Lily, our sweet daughter, and now, from our newborn son, left on a doorstep like an afterthought. I couldn't allow her to have any claim over them, not after what she had done. I made up my mind, I was going to file for divorce and fight to have her parental rights taken away. Emily didn't deserve to be called their mother anymore, and I was determined to protect these two wonderful kids from any future pain she might cause. They didn't need her. We didn't need her. Thankfully, Jessica was still there, standing by my side through it all. She'd been a rock for Lily and me when Emily first disappeared, and now, she was right there helping me with both kids, feeding the baby, picking up Lily from school, being a source of stability in a world that had become so unstable. I was grateful beyond words for her support. She treated both Lily and the baby like they were her own, and I honestly don't know how I would have managed those first few weeks without her. But this time, I didn't break. I didn't sit around feeling lost or waiting for Emily to make the next move. I knew what I had to do, and I did it. I contacted a lawyer and began the divorce process immediately. It felt strange, making it official after everything that had happened, but it was necessary. The lawyer assured me that given the circumstances, her abandonment, the lack of contact, and the fact that she left a newborn on my doorstep, I had a strong case for gaining full custody and having her parental rights terminated. I wasn't doing this out of spite, but out of love for my children. They deserved stability. They deserved a parent who would love and care for them without disappearing on a whim. And that parent would be me. These kids were mine, Lily, with her curious eyes and endless questions, and my newborn son, who hadn't even had the chance to understand what it was like to be part of a family. I would raise them, protect them, and give them the life they deserved. I would be the father they needed, and I would make sure they never felt abandoned like their mother had made them feel.